Hi, I'm Polly Hill and I'm from FuseTV.
Hi, I'm Ree. I am the Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health Officer at the SU.
And today we're going to be talking to Ree about some of her policies and some of her actions in her role. Okay, perfect. So the first question I have for you are, what are your priorities as Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health Officer, and what are you going to do to achieve them?
Okay, so some of my priorities are things that are already ongoing. So there's a lot of ongoing work as I'm basically halfway through the role now, which is kind of crazy. So obviously a really major one that I've been working with the rest of the education officers has been sort of trying to change the culture and how the university views students, because a lot of fundamental issues come from this very severe lack of understanding of what it actually means to be a student nowadays, and sort of viewing the student body as not homogenous, but very much sort of made up of very unique and diverse experiences, whether you're an international student, whether you're commuting, whether you're in part-time work, all of these sort of factors will therefore translate to how you engage with your sort of academics. And just a lot of staff don't realise that. I guess part of that is because a lot of staff don't always engage with students quite one-on-one. And it can be really sort of tricky to remind people that, and then it kind of affects the way that even things like assessments will be dealt with, exams, just anything to do with students, essentially. So that's sort of one of the sort of it's more of a culture shift, but it's one of those things that if it's sort of ingrained in sort of the attitude of the university, then it's obviously going to translate to the student experience. I'm also working on sort of, as a general one, things like cost of living. So we've actually just opened up Essentials, which is the new sort of hub that students can go to. It's like a food pantry, but the whole concept isn't that it's meant to be just a food pantry where you access it if you need it, but also a sort of community space that you can just sort of exist in. The whole idea is that you just have these as a point of access, that it's not your only reason to go there, because it can be quite intimidating as well to go to a space and for the sole reason of accessing resources that you need. So it's sort of trying to bring it more to a baseline level, rather than I am so not doing it. I'm struggling so hard. It's more of a, no, this is here for me to access, as well as it being a space for everyone else.
Yeah, really interesting.
I feel like there's probably other things.
Okay, perfect. My next question for you is, how does the Manchester student community benefit from the existence of the students' union?
So I think before I became an officer, I didn't realise how ingrained the student union was actually doing a multitude of things. So not only do we sort of provide services and support to students, we are pretty much students' biggest advocates in university spaces. So a lot of our roles, not just officers, but also staff in the student union, they are sort of involved in lots of these different university spaces. And sometimes that is the only way that student voice and student perspectives get brought in to university staff. Which is really, really important, because when you don't have people who are directly there just to represent students, you're very easily forgotten, and it's very easy for things to happen without any sort of consideration in mind. So I say that's one key aspect. Another key aspect is obviously providing services such as advice. So you've got advice at SU, for example, that you can go to for any situation. They can guide you to a multitude of different resources and signpost you to different things. We also actually have a lot of student union funds, that, such as Access for Rec, for example. So you can access these things for different sort of purposes, because we recognise that there's just not enough money going around, and students don't have access to a lot of money. And so these things are really necessary for a multitude of reasons. We've also got a fund called the Gender Expression Fund, for example, which students can access to buy gender affirming products and all that kind of thing, which really isn't something that is offered or considered a necessity, but it is something that we do view as a necessity. So it's important that students can access a variety of things. And then also the student union, it just sort of helps support all of the societies and activities that run in the building, which is a lot. I know it's a lot, and it's really crucial to being a student. I mean, some of the best things I ever did as a student was being part of societies like Fuse. And I think that's really important that the SU like helps like obviously like support that and be there for students, not doing it for students, but being there as like a support for students to do these things themselves. And then also just here as like a facility, I guess. Not a facility in the way, sorry, not a facility, but here for like things like we have Corridor Coffee, 532. It's like more subsidized food, and also just I think offering sort of a more community space, because it's really important for people to have places that they can just exist in without it being like for a purpose. Like when you go to the library, you are there more for like academic reasons. So it's really important to have these like other third spaces. So yeah, I'd say like here to support students in activities, in like supporting them with like fund, here offering spaces, obviously food options, and also here as like an advocate for students as well. So if I had to summarize.
Oh, that was good. It's good. Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. My last question I have for you is Gabrielle, who was in your role last year, took quite a concrete and quite like a personal approach to student support, such as like she was holding focus groups with students, which led to a couple of changes like free breakfast being like implemented during exam seasons for I think it was biology students. Your manifesto does feature quite a lot of like direct student communication and student support, but a lot of your work this semester has been quite like curriculum based, like yourself about putting ethics into the curriculums. So my question for you basically is, do you believe that changes in academia and changes in the curriculum are maybe more important or maybe less important than like personal impactful students? And how would you work or will you work to ensure that students still feel seen under your representation?
Yeah, okay. So I think I'm not going to say one is more important than the other, because obviously, like access to things like free breakfast are very much necessary. Also, these things are still happening. They're just sort of like I just don't sort of focus on that at the moment, because like they are already happening, and they did actually happen before Gabrielle as well. So it's always been like an ongoing thing that actually the university has done, which is good. In terms of things like ethics, this sort of goes in line with what I'm working on with decolonizing the curriculum, which although it wasn't originally on my idea statement, I recognize that all of these things are linked up, and it's sort of become an important priority for me as I've sort of been in this role now. And I think there's a level of treating the symptoms and treating the root causes of things. And I think if we want to actually create a lot of real meaningful change as well, we need to treat the roots of everything. And a lot of that is understanding, and a lot of that is actually education around really important things such as ethics and such as decolonizing the curriculum, because you will then, produce students who understand these sort of things to another level, and then that can be brought forward into their future. And I think that's a very worthwhile thing to be recognized, if you know what I mean, because it's not just in the now, it's long term, and you might not see the direct impacts of that right now, but you will in the future. And I think, for example, like it's really important that students of all backgrounds feel like that they are represented in their curriculum, that they are seen, that these things are also recognized, because it's also very isolating, especially as like people of color. It's very isolating to feel that the university curriculum and the culture is very sort of focused on one aspect but not the other. And I think especially in academia, I think a lot of material that we're taught is the result of things that have come from colonization and things that have disproportionately affected people of color. And that's why I do think that it's really important that these things are focused on as well. Because whilst we are also, obviously like it's good to provide things for students, I think the same thing can be like valuable when it comes to sort of not only providing students with like the knowledge and education, but also like the university. They need to be able to change their culture and their perspectives on these sort of topics and actually reflect that and embed that into their own practices for it to actually create real like meaningful change in the long term, which is kind of what we've been working on. We've obviously we had a launch of a toolkit that discusses how to decolonize curriculum, a lot more specifically focused in my faculty, but obviously we're now trying to expand this and also trying to expand work and teaching within my own faculty as well, to not only ensure that we have this toolkit, but that it is taken and utilize and put into practice. And I think I've got the second part of your question. So
Yeah.
I don't think
It was just, no, it was just basically like, what are you going to do to support like personal, like, I don't know, personal demands and needs of students? So you've kind of answered it, but like, what are you going to do to sort of address more that part of your manifesto?
Yeah, so I guess part of that is stuff that I don't like necessarily like have advertised as much. But so part of that is, like I said, with the culture change of how we view students, because then this translates into things like accessibility and all of these things, like by understanding that students are not homogenous. This then translates to other processes that the university does. Also offering things like essentials. So we obviously like open that up and offering the actual like sort of physical relief to sort of the pressures of that. I guess, sorry, I know I've been calling it cost of living, but we've sort of been referring it like as more the material conditions of students, because we're sort of looking at not just like the symptoms of it, but like the actual root causes. So I guess we are doing things to sort of mitigate what the symptoms are. So such as like working on financial support, working on like accessibility, that kind of stuff for students. I myself am doing that in the faculty. But obviously it's a lot of discussions and a lot of ongoing sort of things. And then the second half of that is treating the root causes of it as well. So you've got to do both if we actually want to actually like fully tackle the issue.
Yeah. Perfect. Great. I think that's about everything I have to ask you.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
We're focusing in mind. Thank you so much. Thank you.